Well, speaking of housing, the board did also approve a measure that we're seeing a little more often here in Arlington, and that's the trend towards temporarily converting housing supply into hotel units, particularly in brand new construction. Let's talk a little bit about this proposal from the Highlands Project in Roslyn.
Yeah, thank you. So the Highlands Project came forward and they were trying something, as you said, this is something we've started doing and it works pretty well. It started before the pandemic. And the situation being that when a developer is building a building for residences and they're going to be purchased, it's hard to fill up that building right away. And that's expensive for the developer. And it also is it actually isn't good for anybody to have an empty building. So if you move it to hotel space to start out so that so temporarily, some of those units are hotel spaces. It just allows the building to be used and allows the developer a little more financial wiggle room as they fill it up. And it's traditionally done, actually, as you say, it's new. I don't know if it's quite a tradition yet, but usually a couple of years. And what happened with the Highlands Project is they came forward, the developer actually asked for 7 years to do the hotel use, not the whole thing, but part of it as hotel use. And they were really, I think, are planning to try kind of a new model. And I was comfortable with that. Our staff looked at it and said, I think 5 years for right now. Let's not give 7 years, seems too long. And I was quite comfortable with that. And it turns out the developer was all right with it. But our planning commission, and I'll let Matt talk a little bit more to this because this was a split vote. We don't always have split votes, but this was a 3-2. So the two of us that thought we ought to do it at least for 5 years, I think we're thinking it would be a good kind of a pilot project or an experiment because it was sort of a new approach. I know some folks were worried about all of the hotels that are going empty now. And why would we want more hotel rooms, which I understand. But when you listen to the developer talk, these rooms wouldn't come online for several more years. And they're actually being designed kind of to pandemic specifications, if you will. There's a sense that people with hotels are going to want a different kind of hotel experience going forward to feel secure during a pandemic or whatever else. So it's a ways out. I don't think it would affect the existing hotel stock that we've got now, which some of which is going to just probably disappear. So we could end up with actually, now we have a glut of hotel rooms. We could end up with not enough hotel rooms if everything really picks up and we've lost a lot of hotel rooms. And there's quite a lag time to build more. So with all of that, I was comfortable with the 5 years trying it as a pilot, but my colleagues didn't agree. And maybe this is a good time, Matt, for me to turn it over to you.
I was just going to say, Matt, you were one of those colleagues who didn't agree. So give us your reasoning on going along with the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Well, I think that this is a temporary use, and we had approved the final use here of being apartments. And so, I felt that the developer in this case should come back and actually, if they wanted 7 years, they should come back and actually apply for a different use for some of the Highlands building. These are going to be beautiful and not cheap. They're going to be Class A type accommodations, a little nicer than the average. And so I still feel and felt that the Planning Commission's recommendations of 2 years, we want, the highest end housing has an impact as you go down in terms of cost and amenities with respect to multifamily housing. So I didn't feel that I wanted to lock in or provide this sort of investment security at this level for 5 years or 7. The Planning Commission's recommendation was for 2 years with an option for 2 additional years. And that is, we just granted the 2 years this time, but I communicated then that my current inclination, if I'm lucky enough to still be on the board, would be to add that 2 years later. And so the distinction between Libby and Christian's position and the three of us who wanted to stick with 2 years wasn't that great, but it is. I do believe that temporary use of some of these new buildings is better than not having that temporary use. And so I think that it's a good road. We will see how this impacts the housing market, and we will see. We very much hope that those building in Arlington will continue to invest here. Our recovery over the coming weeks, months, and years is dependent upon continuing to add housing supply in smart ways that aren't necessarily taking a lot of green space, and we have enough resources to serve those who will come into those new buildings. But if we don't add housing supply, then that'll be a challenge. So that's where I landed, and a little summary of why I went with the Planning Commission's point of view. And I don't know if there are pieces you want to add to that, Libby. We also took some steps with respect to a building in Nelson Street near Green Valley in Shirlington that I know we want to cover too, but wanted to make sure, even as we came out on different places on this hotel use, I think we had a good discussion that recognized both the need for economic recovery and housing supply.